There's a form of dominance that doesn't require confrontation, manipulation, or even words. It's the quiet withdrawal of your presence, the deliberate act of not showing up where others expect you, the refusal to engage, to explain, to validate, or to chase. This is the law of absence, the art of turning your silence and distance into a weapon that speaks louder than any argument. You see, most people are addicted to attention. They feed on it like air. They depend on reactions to confirm their existence. When you ignore them, when you stop responding, when you disappear, you're not just withholding attention, you're removing their sense of control. That's why ignoring someone isn't passive. It's the most active form of psychological power. It dismantles their illusion that they matter on their terms, because power isn't about what you do, it's about what you choose not to do. Every interaction in life is a negotiation of energy. Who gives more attention? Who reacts first? Who tries harder? Who explains more? Those are all signs of who holds less power. The powerful understand this. They know that attention is a form of currency, and the one who spends less always ends up wealthier. You don't need to fight to reclaim control. You simply need to stop feeding what drains you. But most people can't. They fear the emptiness that follows silence. They confuse withdrawal with weakness. They think not replying means losing. That's the illusion you must break. The truth is, the moment you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. You become the one who defines the pace, the distance, the meaning of every interaction. Absence creates space, and in that space, others start to imagine. Imagination is the most powerful force in human psychology. When you're silent, people fill that silence with their own fears, insecurities, and desires. They start questioning themselves, replaying moments, wondering what they did wrong, what you're thinking, or whether they ever mattered. You've left the room, but you still occupy their mind. That's power, not physical, not verbal, but psychological. It's invisible dominance. You control without contact. You influence without presence. You lead through withdrawal. That's why absence is a weapon, because it triggers the most primal human instinct, the need for validation. The more someone seeks it, the weaker they become in your presence. When you deny them that validation, you force them to confront their own dependency. This is why the most disciplined people often seem cold. It's not that they lack emotion, it's that they've mastered it. They've realized that emotion is fuel, and you don't give your fuel to those who burn it recklessly. You see, every time you respond to disrespect, every time you explain yourself to those who've already made up their minds, every time you try to prove your worth, you lower your value. The world doesn't respect explanations, it respects results. The moment you start explaining, you reveal that you care too much about perception. Silence, on the other hand, says something much louder. I don't need to be understood. I know my worth. That's why the law of absence is so unsettling, because it shows who's dependent and who's free. The dependent need attention to feel real. The free understand that attention is just noise. Power grows in silence just as roots deepen in darkness. You can't see it, but it's happening. Every moment you resist reacting, you strengthen the foundation of your control. The art of ignoring isn't arrogance, it's intelligence. It's knowing that energy follows focus, and focus is life's most valuable resource. So you must protect it with the same intensity you protect your health. Detachment is not indifference, it's selective engagement. It's the discipline to respond only when it serves your higher purpose. Imagine the calm that comes from no longer needing to respond to every message, every opinion, every emotional storm. You become unshakable. People can't manipulate what doesn't react. The law of absence teaches you that distance is not the opposite of connection. It's the purification of it. What remains when you pull back is what truly matters. The rest dissolves. The people who truly value you will stay connected through silence. The ones who don't will reveal their true dependence on your attention. Either way, you win. Because absence clarifies everything. It reveals motives, exposes neediness, and refines your circle. It's the ultimate filter. Weak connections collapse under the weight of distance. Strong ones adapt to it. That's why every powerful person at some point withdraws. They step back not to disappear but to observe, to reset the balance, to remind others that their presence is not to be taken for granted. The world will test your silence. It will provoke you, guilt you, and demand that you respond. Don't. Every reaction is a confession of attachment. Every silence is a statement of control. People who can't handle being ignored are people who've never faced themselves. Your absence forces them to. They'll call you cold, detached, arrogant, not because you are, but because they can't handle losing control over how you see them. The irony is that the more you ignore what doesn't deserve your energy, the more valuable your energy becomes. People start to notice when you stop giving it. They start to respect what they once took for granted. That's the paradox of absence, one. It increases your presence. What once seemed ordinary becomes rare, and rarity always attracts. Think of the people you respect most. They don't chase attention. Attention chases them. They understand that ignoring noise is the first step to amplifying power. It's not about being unreachable. It's about being intentional. Presence should always be a privilege, not a habit. So learn to disappear strategically, not out of anger, but out of awareness. Withdraw to reset your value. Silence is the laboratory of strength. It's where you observe without being observed, where you plan without interference, where you detach emotionally to act rationally. In silence, you stop reacting to the world and start shaping it. The powerful never move in reaction to others. They move according to their own timing, their own rhythm, their own invisible logic. The moment you stop being available to everyone, you start being valuable to the right ones. Your absence becomes a statement that your energy is sacred, your focus is selective, and your time is currency. People sense this, and their behavior changes. They approach you differently, they measure their words. They start to see you as someone who cannot be controlled by emotion or expectation. That's how respect is born, not from aggression but from restraint. Ignoring is not cruelty, it's correction. It teaches others how to treat you without a single word. It shows that you are not here to play their emotional games. You stand outside of them, detached, calm, in control. That's the highest form of psychological dominance, when others adjust their behavior to match your silence. You no longer need to explain boundaries. Your absence defines them. The law of absence isn't about withdrawal for escape. It's withdrawal for mastery. It's about reclaiming the power that constant reaction steals from you. Because the world's noise is endless. Every opinion, every demand, every expectation tries to pull you into chaos. Ignoring is how you preserve your clarity. It's how you protect your mind from being hijacked by emotional manipulation. You stop trying to win arguments and start winning peace. You stop proving yourself and start observing others expose themselves. That's the hidden advantage of silence. It reveals who can handle your calm. The more composed you are, the more uncomfortable the reactive become. They can't stand that you don't mirror their chaos. They'll test you, provoke you, and project onto you. Stay still, let them unravel. You'll see their true nature when they face your indifference. Because power doesn't always show through what you do. Sometimes it shows through what you refuse to do. The ability to ignore is a sign of inner abundance. You don't chase validation because you already validate yourself. You don't need to be seen because you already see clearly. You don't need to explain because truth needs no defense. The law of absence transforms your silence into signal. It tells the world you are complete, that you no longer depend on reaction to define who you are. And that's when you become untouchable. Because no one can control someone who isn't seeking control over others. Ignoring, in its highest form, isn't about dismissing, it's about transcending. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that your energy, your time, your focus are not for sale. That's the kind of power that doesn't fade. It deepens with every act of restraint. You don't chase respect, you attract it through the gravity of your silence. That's how you rise above the noise, by becoming the echo they can't stop hearing even after you've gone. When you learn to ignore with purpose, you're no longer just managing interactions, you're mastering perception. Absence is not simply disappearing, it's crafting an aura. The way people feel your lack of presence determines how they'll treat your presence. Think about that carefully. When you vanish and they barely notice, it tells you everything about the value they placed on you. When you vanish and they can't stop wondering, it tells you that your energy carried weight. That's the essence of psychological leverage. Your absence exposes the truth that your words could never reveal. The law of absence is not about detachment for the sake of pride. It's about detachment as a form of strategy. It's learning that silence is not the void, it's the frame around power. The more you speak, the more you reveal. The more you're seen, the more predictable you become. But when you withdraw, when you step into calculated silence, people project onto you their own interpretations. They fill in the gaps with curiosity, fear, admiration, resentment, emotions that work in your favor if you stay composed. Every person you ignore becomes a mirror, reflecting their own insecurities. They begin to wonder, did they do something wrong? Did they lose your respect? Are you occupied with something greater? The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that their attention turns inward, and you become the center of their quiet obsession. You control the rhythm without a word. That's why emotional detachment feels supernatural to the undisciplined. They mistake calmness for coldness and restraint for lack of care. They don't understand that control is not the absence of feeling, it's the mastery of it. To ignore is to reclaim emotional sovereignty. It's refusing to participate in others' storms. The undisciplined are like open windows. Anything can enter and disturb them. The powerful are like locked vaults. They decide what gets in. The law of absence teaches you to close those emotional windows. You stop allowing access to every passerby. You become intentional about who can reach you and how often. This boundary, this emotional perimeter, changes everything. When you limit access, you amplify value. When people have to wait to hear from you, your words gain weight. When they can no longer predict your reactions, your presence becomes magnetic. The human mind is wired to chase uncertainty. Predictability kills interest. Mystery keeps it alive. That's why absence doesn't distance, it attracts. It leaves an unfinished sentence that others desperately want to complete. It's not rejection, it's redirection. You're teaching others to meet you on your terms. But make no mistake, applying this law requires inner discipline, the temptation to explain yourself, to seek closure, to prove you're not cold. Those are emotional traps. They exist to pull you back into dependency. You have to resist them. You have to let silence do what words cannot. Because every time you break your silence out of impatience, you reset the power dynamic. You turn your calm into a confession. Power evaporates when you start explaining what silence already proved. The wise understand this. They use absence not as punishment, but as purification. To withdraw is to remove contamination from your energy. It's how you regain clarity when chaos tries to claim you. The more you withdraw, the more you observe. And the more you observe, the more you understand. Because silence sharpens perception. Words distract. When you ignore noise, you start hearing truth. You see the patterns others miss. You notice who's sincere and who's strategic. You see who needs constant reassurance and who moves with inner confidence. Absence reveals all these things. It's the test few pass. Those who panic in silence expose their weakness. Those who remain calm reveal strength. You can't fake peace. It's either there or it's not. That's why ignoring becomes a form of psychological X-ray. It shows what's hidden beneath appearances. Watch how people react to your distance, and you'll understand their true nature. The needy will chase harder. The manipulative will guilt-trip you. The insecure will talk behind your back. The self-assured will respect your space. You don't have to analyze their words, just observe their response to your absence. It's the most honest data you'll ever get about a person. The law of absence teaches that what you don't say often reveals more than what you do, because silence forces others to show their cards. When you no longer engage in emotional games, you see who depended on your reactions to feel powerful. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. The game ends for you, but continues for them. They'll keep trying to provoke, confuse, or draw you in. Not because they care, but because they can't stand your independence. They need you to be reactive to feel relevant, but you've outgrown that. You've discovered a deeper truth, that indifference is not cruelty, it's evolution. It's emotional maturity in its purest form. It's realizing that peace is worth more than attention. That not every battle deserves your energy. That walking away is not losing. It's ascending. Every time you ignore what once triggered you, you evolve into a higher version of yourself. You begin to understand that distance isn't emptiness, it's space for growth. You start replacing reaction with reflection. You stop trying to fix others and focus on mastering yourself. And soon, you notice that the world starts adjusting to your calm. People who used to drain you start falling away. Environments that once consumed you start feeling foreign. You're no longer available to chaos. You've become selective, refined, deliberate. That's the transformation that silence brings. It doesn't just protect your energy, it redefines it. Your absence becomes your language. It communicates confidence, control, and calm authority. When you can ignore disrespect without losing composure, you've reached a rare level of power. Because the ability to remain unmoved in a world addicted to reaction is the highest form of dominance. Everyone wants to be loud. Few have the strength to stay silent. Everyone wants to prove. Few have the patience to let truth reveal itself. Everyone wants to be understood. Few understand that misunderstanding is a filter, not a failure. Absence is not running away. It's allowing reality to separate what's real from what's noise. You must learn to trust that silence is working even when it feels like nothing is happening. People may mock your detachment, but they'll eventually respect it. Because distance exposes what words hide. Who truly values your presence and who only values your attention. The moment they realize they no longer have access to you, something shifts. They remember the energy you brought. They replay the calm you embodied. They feel the void your silence left behind. That void is the echo of your power. It's what remains when noise fades. Absence makes people see what your presence made them forget, your worth. That's why the law of absence doesn't seek revenge. It seeks revelation. It lets time do the talking. It transforms you from participant to observer, from reactor to ruler. You no longer chase control, you become it. That's the essence of ignoring with power. It's the act of saying, I choose peace over noise, purpose over reaction, clarity over chaos. It's not something you announce, it's something you embody. When you can stand still while others panic, when you can detach while others depend, when you can remain silent while others scream for attention, you've mastered not just communication, but existence. Because silence, when controlled, becomes magnetic. It draws in curiosity, respect, and even fear, not because you intended to intimidate, but because people can't comprehend someone who doesn't need validation. They crave your response because your silence confronts their insecurity. That's the paradox. The more you ignore, the louder your presence becomes, not because you're distant, but because you're defined. You no longer chase to prove your worth, and your absence proves it for you. The deeper you go into the law of absence, the more you understand that silence is not a tactic. It's an identity. It becomes part of how you move through the world. It shapes how you speak, when you appear, how long you stay, and when you disappear. You begin to realize that your power does not come from what you add, but from what you remove. You subtract your reactions, your over-explanations, your emotional impulses, and what remains is authority. Power is never loud because loudness reveals need. The one who needs to be heard betrays a lack of confidence in his own influence. But the one who can withdraw, who can vanish without warning, who can be present without performing, that one holds invisible power. You can feel it in a room before they say a word. It's in their calmness, their lack of urgency, the ease with which they detach. That's the essence of psychological dominance, not intimidation, but centeredness. When you no longer need to be seen, the world begins to notice you differently. You become the exception in a world addicted to attention. Everyone else competes for validation. You become valuable by scarcity. And that's the first hidden law within absence. Scarcity transforms perception. When something is always available, the human mind stops assigning value to it. It becomes background noise. But when something disappears, the mind becomes obsessed with it. It rewinds, replays, and imagines what it lost. That's the invisible gravity of absence. It creates presence by contrast. The less you appear, the more they feel you. The less you speak, the more they want to listen. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. You see, the mind hates uncertainty. It wants closure. It craves explanation. When you withhold it, you create tension, and that tension is power. Most people don't understand this. They think giving more is how you win people, but giving too much destroys curiosity. It removes the mystery that fuels connection. When you ignore strategically, you're not punishing, you're preserving the balance of attraction. The moment you become predictable, your energy loses its spark. That's why, even in close relationships, a degree of distance is necessary. Love without mystery becomes comfort, and comfort breeds complacency. Power and respect only exist when others know that your absence is possible. They must always feel that you can walk away, not because you want to, but because you can. That silent can is what keeps your presence valuable. The powerless beg to be understood. The powerful remain undefined. That's what absence protects, your undefinable nature. The less others can categorize you, the more they're drawn to you. They wonder what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you might do next, and that curiosity gives you psychological leverage. You're not chasing attention. Attention is orbiting you. Every withdrawal becomes an event. Every silence becomes a message. Every return becomes a statement. That's the rhythm of power. Approach, withdraw, approach, withdraw. Like the tide, you control the flow without words. You never flood, you never dry out. You move with deliberate restraint. This is not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. Because to ignore is to honor your own peace over someone else's need for validation. The moment you stop reacting to every emotional demand, you start to feel something rare, internal stillness. And that stillness is the foundation of authority. People can sense it. They might not articulate it, but they feel it. Your calmness unsettles them because it reminds them of their own chaos. They project their discomfort onto you and call you distant, arrogant, or heartless. Let them. That's just their insecurity translating what they can't understand. Emotional independence. Most people only feel alive when they're emotionally entangled. You, however, start to feel alive when you're emotionally free. That's why absence is misunderstood. It's seen as neglect when it's actually clarity. It's mistaken for apathy when it's actually discernment. To ignore is to decide what deserves your inner world. It's choosing peace over participation. Because not every conflict deserves a response, and not every person deserves access. The more selective you are, the more stable you become. But stability feels intimidating to the unstable. When you refuse to react, you expose their dependency on reaction. They don't want peace. They want drama disguised as connection. They need chaos to feel significant. You break that cycle when you go silent. You force them to face the emptiness they've been avoiding. Ignoring them doesn't just deprive them of attention. It confronts them with themselves. And that's why silence hurts more than words ever could. Words can be argued with. Silence cannot. It creates an unanswered question that echoes in the mind. The more they try to fill it, the deeper it gets. That's the psychological sting of being ignored. It feels like rejection, but it's actually revelation. It shows how much they depended on your energy. When you take that away, they realize how much they relied on it. That's when they start to value it. People only respect what they risk losing. The constant presence of your attention made them blind to its worth. Your absence reopens their eyes. That's the law. What's always there becomes invisible. What disappears becomes sacred. So when you step away, you're not losing them. You're reteaching them. You're reminding them that your energy is earned, not assumed. But this law works both ways. Absence also reveals how much you depended on others for validation. When you withdraw and feel anxious, empty, or desperate to be seen, that's your lesson. It shows you where your peace was outsourced. It exposes the emotional debts you've accumulated. The silence feels uncomfortable because it's detoxing you from the addiction to reaction. Every ignored message, every unanswered call, every moment of being unseen, they become training grounds for self-containment. You learn to breathe through absence instead of filling it. You learn to enjoy solitude instead of fearing it. And then something extraordinary happens. You stop needing to ignore. You simply stop being available to what's beneath you. Your silence is no longer defense. It's natural. You've transcended reaction. You've entered the level of calm dominance where your stillness itself commands respect. You no longer need to prove that you don't care. It's evident. You no longer need to explain your boundaries. They're felt. You no longer need to plan your withdrawal, it becomes instinct. That's the invisible transition from using absence as a weapon to embodying it as wisdom. You no longer use it to control others. You use it to master yourself. And paradoxically, that's when your influence expands. Because true power never seeks control. It radiates it. People begin to sense that your attention is sacred. They think twice before disturbing your peace. They begin to guard their words when speaking to you. That's when you know the law of absence has become part of your essence, when your silence shapes the behavior of others. You no longer need to assert anything. Your detachment speaks for you. Ignoring, at this level, is not about rejection. It's about preservation. You preserve your mental energy, your emotional clarity, your focus. You stop scattering your presence and start concentrating it. That's how power grows, by compression, not expansion. The more contained your energy becomes, the more potent it feels. People can sense your centeredness, and they either rise to meet it or fall away. You stop chasing connection and start magnetizing alignment. You're no longer in the crowd, you're above it. Not by superiority, but by self-awareness. You understand that the need to be seen is the need that enslaves most. The moment you free yourself from that, you become untouchable. Ignoring is not about turning away from people, it's about turning toward yourself. It's how you remember who you are when the world tries to make you forget. The greatest victories in life are often silent. The battles fought in the mind where no one sees your restraint, but everyone feels its result. That's why absence is not weakness. It's inner expansion disguised as withdrawal. You're not escaping, you're evolving. You're not hiding, you're observing. You're not cold, you're controlled. The law of absence teaches you that when you no longer need to respond, you've already won. There's a moment, somewhere in the silence, where you realize that the act of ignoring isn't directed at others anymore. It's directed at your old self, the version of you that needed to explain everything, the one that chased understanding, the one that believed being seen was the same as being valued. Absence starts as a tactic, but over time it becomes a purification. You begin to ignore not just people, but impulses, noise, and distractions. You withdraw from your own neediness. You start declining invitations that drain you, conversations that go nowhere, and habits that feed your anxiety. You're no longer starving for connection because you've discovered the rare satisfaction of stillness. It's not loneliness anymore, it's sovereignty. Silence stops being empty and starts being full of awareness, full of strength, full of direction. You start noticing that everything loud eventually collapses under its own weight. Those who shout the most for attention burn out the fastest. Those who chase validation become defined by it. But those who can be unseen without losing themselves develop an aura that others can't replicate. They move differently, slower, calmer, deliberate. Every gesture means something. Every word carries weight. Because when you no longer spend your energy reacting, you accumulate presence. You build psychological gravity. People feel it when you walk into a room. The steadiness, the lack of need, the quiet certainty that you don't need anything from anyone. That's the ultimate form of power, needing nothing. Not because you have everything, but because you've stopped believing you need to prove your worth to anyone outside yourself. That's what the law of absence teaches you at its core, that control isn't about others obeying you. It's about no longer being enslaved by your own impulses. You learn that ignoring is not indifference, it's mastery of focus. You decide what deserves your attention, and that decision becomes your filter for everything. Conversations, relationships, ambitions. You no longer say yes to avoid guilt or discomfort. You say no with peace. You don't explain why you're distant, you simply are. You stop apologizing for the distance you need to think clearly. That's what most people misunderstand. Silence is not avoidance. It's perspective. It's stepping out of the crowd long enough to see who's leading it. In silence, you begin to hear the subtleties of power, how energy moves, how influence circulates, how people use words to bind themselves to illusions. You start seeing how attention is traded like currency. Some give it away recklessly, others hoard it carefully. You, however, start to invest it only where it multiplies peace. The powerful ignore not out of arrogance but out of efficiency. They understand that every reaction carries a cost. Every argument drains mental capital. Every emotional entanglement taxes focus. The less you react, the richer you become in clarity. Ignoring becomes your saving strategy. It keeps your mind unpolluted. It teaches you to hold back not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You begin to understand that power is built on what you can resist, not what you can control. Everyone can talk. Few can stay silent. Everyone can react. Few can remain calm. Everyone can want attention. Few can exist without it. The rare ones who can, those who operate through silence, always end up leading those who can't. Because the world is drawn to what it can't fully understand. Mystery is magnetic. It awakens the imagination. And imagination is more powerful than truth because it can't be confined. When you ignore, people start imagining you. They wonder where you are, what you're thinking, what you're planning. Their curiosity becomes a leash they put on themselves. You don't even have to pull, they follow the thought of you. That's the hidden power behind ignoring. It turns your absence into mental presence. They can't escape you because they don't understand you. You're not reacting, not defending, not engaging, and that makes you unpredictable. Unpredictability is power. It creates psychological pressure. The need to understand becomes obsession, and obsession gives you control without effort. You're not even trying to dominate. Your silence does it for you. That's why every powerful figure throughout history understood the value of disappearance. The greatest leaders, thinkers, artists, they all knew when to withdraw. They knew that too much visibility kills mystique. When you're everywhere, you lose shape. When you disappear, you become legend. Absence doesn't erase your influence. It amplifies it. People start filling in the silence with myth. They start idealizing what they no longer have access to. That's how empires of perception are built. Not through noise, but through selective silence. You can apply this in every area of life. In conversation, saying less makes others reveal more. In relationships, disappearing recalibrates the dynamic. In work, being unavailable makes your presence more respected. In self-mastery, ignoring distraction builds focus like a fortress. Ignoring, when done consciously, is not suppression, it's refinement. You refine your energy by choosing where it flows. You stop explaining and start embodying. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop seeking approval and start exuding assurance. The irony is that the more detached you become, the more people want to attach to you. That's the paradox of absence. The less you give, the more they want. But here lies the final discipline. You can't use absence to manipulate or it becomes performance. True power requires authenticity. You must mean your silence. You must truly not need their reaction. If you use absence to provoke, you've already lost. Because the moment you care whether they notice, your silence stops being power and becomes strategy. And strategy without detachment is weakness disguised as control. The purest form of absence is uncalculated. It's the natural outcome of self-respect. You're simply too focused on your evolution to care about validation. Your silence becomes unintentional art. That's why people who reach this level seem effortlessly magnetic. Their calm isn't performed, it's lived. They ignore not as defense, but as default. They've transcended the need to explain or be seen. That's when ignoring becomes sacred, when it's no longer about withholding from others, but protecting the sanctity of your inner world. You understand that not everyone deserves to witness your process, that your peace doesn't need to be public, and that privacy is not secrecy. It's protection. You no longer need to announce your absence or justify your silence. You simply live in a state of controlled presence. People come and go, but you remain still, a silent axis around which noise spins but never touches. That's the level where ignoring becomes art and silence becomes identity. You've mastered the law of absence when you can stand alone without feeling lonely, when you can walk away without looking back, when you can observe chaos without participating in it. That's not coldness, that's power refined into peace. Because the truth is, ignoring is not about them at all. It's about remembering that nothing external defines you unless you let it. And once you live from that truth, you become immune to manipulation, to provocation, to noise. You no longer react, you decide. You no longer explain, you exist. You no longer chase, you attract through absence. That's when you stop using silence as armor and start wearing it as your skin. Mastery of absence is not learned through theory. It's forged in the discomfort of restraint, in the moments when every instinct tells you to speak, to explain, to defend, to prove that you're right and you don't. You sit in silence and let time reveal what truth cannot be forced to show. You watch as people who once demanded your energy begin to fade, as situations that once consumed you start to dissolve without your participation. That's when you begin to understand that ignoring is not about arrogance, it's about elevation. It's about rising above the frequency of reaction, because reaction is slavery. Every time you react, you're controlled. Every time you stay silent, you reclaim freedom. The world trains you to believe that speaking up is strength, but true strength often hides in restraint. The weak shout for validation, the strong wait in silence. The weak demand recognition, the strong let results speak for them. And the rare ones, the ones who understand the law of absence, realize that there's a form of communication more powerful than words: withdrawal. To disappear without warning, without resentment, without announcement, that's not cruelty, that's clarity. It's how you tell the world, my energy is no longer available where it isn't valued. You don't argue, you vanish, you don't beg. You let absence deliver the message. The silence that follows becomes a mirror where others see themselves, often for the first time. They realize that your presence was never ordinary. They realize that your attention had a weight they didn't respect until it was gone. That's the punishment of absence, not vengeance but realization. Ignoring is the quiet teacher that humbles the careless. It's not loud, but it leaves echoes that last. The one who can walk away without closure holds the upper hand in every human interaction, because closure is often just a disguised attempt to regain control. When you no longer need it, you've transcended dependence. You've learned to find peace without answers. That's what the world fears. A person who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't beg for understanding, who doesn't flinch when ignored. Because they can't control someone like that, you become unpredictable, untouchable, unreadable, and in that space of mystery, you become magnetic. The law of absence doesn't demand that you isolate yourself from the world. It demands that you interact with it from a higher vantage point, one where your emotions no longer dictate your moves. You begin to see relationships as mirrors of energy exchange, not as lifelines. You start to measure people not by what they say, but by how they handle your silence. You learn that absence reveals love more honestly than words ever could. The ones who truly care find ways to stay connected without demanding. The ones who only wanted attention disappear. Your circle shrinks, but your peace expands. And that's the trade worth making. Less noise, more truth. When you no longer fear being forgotten, you become unforgettable. Because your worth is no longer tied to presence, it's tied to impact. The people who understand your silence feel it even when you're gone. They carry it as a weight in their minds, as a question that never fully fades. That's how power operates. It doesn't announce, it lingers. The law of absence is not a tool for manipulation. It's a philosophy of composure. It teaches you that life is not about constant engagement. It's about selective engagement. You don't need to be everywhere to be felt. You don't need to speak to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. You learn to let go of the urge to prove yourself because you finally understand that truth doesn't need witnesses. It needs time. You stop correcting lies. You stop defending your character. You stop explaining your choices. You become so focused on your own evolution that the opinions of others dissolve into static. And what happens then is transformation. You shift from being reactive to reflective. You begin to recognize how much energy the world wastes in trying to be understood, in trying to stay visible. You step away from that game. You walk in silence while others exhaust themselves trying to be seen. Your life becomes a statement written in absence, calm, precise, and unshakable. When you finally master the law of absence, you stop fearing distance, endings, or silence. You start to see them as sacred spaces where your strength grows. You realize that not every connection deserves continuation. That ignoring is sometimes the kindest act you can do, because it allows others to confront themselves without your interference. You stop chasing reciprocation Because you've learned that detachment is the highest form of faith. Faith that what's meant to align will align, and what's meant to fall away will dissolve naturally. Absence creates alignment. It filters falsehoods, exposes pretenders, and elevates truth. And through it all you become something rare in this age of noise: composed, still, whole. The power of ignoring lies in what it creates: not distance, but gravity; not emptiness, but presence; not weakness, but strength. Because when you ignore what doesn't deserve you, you make room for what does. The more you detach, the more you attract what resonates with your peace, and that peace becomes your silent declaration of victory. Ignoring is not avoidance, it's intelligence applied to emotion. It's refusing to waste sacred energy on what cannot grow. It's choosing silence not as a reaction but as a stance. And those who misunderstand it were never meant to understand you. They'll label you distant, cold, arrogant. But deep down they'll feel your presence long after you've left. Because true power leaves no noise, only echoes. And those echoes become your legacy. The law of absence teaches that you don't rise by adding, but by subtracting. You don't gain power by controlling others, but by controlling your reactions. You don't become unforgettable by shouting louder, but by mastering silence so completely that it speaks for you. The day you no longer need to explain, defend, or respond, that's the day you've become untouchable. Absence doesn't diminish your influence, it concentrates it. Your stillness becomes your statement. Your silence becomes your authority. And your distance becomes your proof of control. That's why ignoring, when done with calm conviction, is the strongest weapon in existence, because it leaves nothing for others to fight against. There's no argument, no resistance, no emotional target. There's only peace, and peace is undefeatable. The world cannot manipulate what it cannot move, and the person who can ignore noise is the one who controls it. Silence isn't the absence of power, it's the proof of it. Subscribe because real power doesn't shout, it whispers.